Damn. We are live. What's up? What's up? What's up? Hello. Good afternoon to you, Dr. L. Teddy. How are you, sir?
I am great. How art thou?
Listen, ready for Thanksgiving vacation. I know that. I'm here, but I'm ready.
Are
Listen.
you all working at all next week?
Monday and Tuesday. We're off on Wednesday. That's why we didn't get Veterans Day off. They flipped it. So instead of us getting Veterans Day off, we got this Wednesday off, which I was here for. Because no disrespect to the veterans, but I'm here for a 5-day weekend. I'm all right with that.
A lot of schools
Yeah. I've
have
worked at
are
schools where
going
they've done
to
that before.
a lot of schools are just using Thanksgiving as a fall break.
Yeah. And I've worked at schools before where we worked Veterans Day, but then we ended up having that Wednesday before Thanksgiving off. Rather than what's up, Vovo? Rather than having like a half a day on Wednesday or early dismissal or whatever. So we just have the whole day off. So I'm working Monday and Tuesday. And then I have the rest of the week off. And I'll take it. It is like a little break for me. You know, that'll be like a little fall break. I'm here for it. I'm here for it. So how's everything going with you? I know you're not in the traditional education setting, but you are still in adult education. So how are things going with you, sir?
Ah,
Okay.
so great. I will be working up until Wednesday. I will work Wednesday. Wednesday will be a light day for me though. It's basically I won't be teaching. I'll be getting some pay. I'm going to use that day to get some paperwork done. And
Okay.
reports and stuff done. I'll be off the rest of the weekend. And yeah, gonna do
Okay.
some stuff.
All right.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, before we move on any further, welcome everybody who's in the room. I want to thank all of our new subscribers. Thank you guys so much for being here. We appreciate every share, every comment, every like, every word of mouth, recommendation, all that good stuff. So thank you guys for being here. All of our new subscribers. Thank you so much. Also, we are streaming as a on all podcast platforms. We are on Google Play. We are on iTunes. We are on Spreaker.com. So, you know, you can catch us in the car too, honey. Catch us in the car.
Wow,
It-
I didn't know that I was all over, Al
I
Gore's
told you
internet like that. I
that.
know you probably did, but I probably
Yes, yes, auntie. Mama, you
well,
made
hey to the
it.
people
Mama, you
listening.
made it.
Hey to the people listening on the podcast. Mommy, I've made it. I am all over Al Gore's good
Good
internet.
intranets.
The
So
internet.
do you want to do the update first, or do you want to do Nickelby?
Up to you.
As we promised you guys, we said that I kept a list of the things that came up, and so we decided we would discuss Nickelby today, also known as No Child Left Behind. Anybody in education that says No Child Left Behind every time they say it ain't been in education long,
It's
because
always
most people.
Nickelby.
Right. I remember the first time my principal said Nickelby, we were like, what? He was like, y'all don't know Nickelby? We were like, what you talking about? And then when he was like, No Child
Hmm.
Left Behind, we were like, oh. And I don't think I've said No Child Left Behind
Yeah,
ever.
right. It's always Nickelby.
At least when I'm talking to people within education circles. If I'm talking to somebody else,
Mhm.
then yes, I will say No Child Left Behind. But within education circles, nobody. It's Nickelby. But with that being said, do you want to start with Nickelby, or do you want to do the updates first and then we can finish up with it?
Now that I've had my drink of lemonade, I'll do my updates. Now, updates are easy because and let me say this before I go through my updates that I have. Unfortunately, and I'm going to put that out there, unfortunately, because of a lot of school reopenings and so forth are attached to politics and elections and so forth. Um, and this is for some states a lame duck session, or a lame duck time period
Time
because
period.
school board changes. It could be a gubernatorial change, a mayoral change. All of those things. A lot of news isn't coming out. A lot of people are waiting until the next person comes into office and is seated before they make hard decisions, but some things have to be done in the wake of everything going on. So, with that being said, I wanted to start off by saying that now, with regard to statewide decisions that are being made, statewide decisions are few and far between. And I'm going to go through those. What the states are doing, most states are allowing individual districts to make their own decisions about what closures and what they're going to do with regard to in-person schools within their respective districts. So the information that I have is as of the 18th of November. Um, and I've been looking to scour to see more up to date things, but everything I have, the latest stuff I have on the statewide level is as of November 18th. So as of November 18th, um, the your area really be Washington D.C. has closed schools. They have announced school closures for the Washington D.C. area.
And
Um, district ordered school closures.
can I put a caveat in that?
Hmm.
I think the reason why they're saying that is because DC was thinking about doing a hybrid starting in November.
Hmm.
They have been talking about it and opening up for small group instruction and for struggling students. They weren't going to do the overall open, but they were trying to work towards a gradual. And so, yeah.
So yeah, but they have district order school closings.
Mhm.
9 states um right now have had state order regional school closings, required closures for certain grade levels or allowed hybrid instruction only. Let me say that again, and I'm going to tell you which states those are. 9 states have had state ordered regional school closures, required closures for certain grade levels, or allowed hybrid instruction only. Those states are California, Delaware, Hawaii, Michigan, North Carolina, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, and West Virginia. Okay. Let me say those states again. That's California, Delaware, Hawaii. Did I say Detroit area earlier? I meant Delaware. California, Delaware, Hawaii, Michigan, North Carolina, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, and West Virginia. 4 states have state ordered in-person instruction, meaning these states have said y'all are going to school whether or not you like it. They have state ordered in-person instruction. Now, that may not mean that it has to be 100% like it was before COVID, but that state has ordered that there must be some form of in-person instruction within that state mandated. Those 4 states are Arkansas, of course, Florida, because this is what my great state of Florida does. Arkansas, Florida, Iowa, and Texas. Those 4 states have ordered state ordered in-person instruction. And then 37 states have had some types of reopenings that varied by the school or but by the district where, like I said earlier, those other states have decided that they were going to let the districts make their decision as to what they're going to do. Now, some districts that I looked up and that I've heard about thus far, some specific, and these are mainly large districts and large areas that I've heard about. Officials in Boston, in the Boston area, they have suspended all in-person learning at as of the end of October, because of the climbing rates of coronavirus, and that was after twice delaying. That was after after they had already delayed the start of a phased in return to classrooms. So that was that's Boston and Philadelphia. They are reversing their plans to begin a hybrid model for their youngest students. Um, so they reversed their plans for that. I also got wind, and you can probably speak to this really be many counties in Maryland have had school boards that have decided to discontinue in-person learning and or delay plans to phase it in because of the spikes in that area.
Yeah.
Uh,
My county never went back, but there were other counties that had gone back or were planning to go back, like I said, in November. So yeah, they were having school board meetings like up until about 2 weeks ago, still trying to put the plan in place to go back before Christmas. So yeah.
um, I mentioned Michigan earlier, but Governor Whitmer in Michigan, she's probably the at the forefront of making swooping decisions or sweeping, I should say, decisions as it goes with a state, because she announced new restrictions for the entire state, including the cancellation of in-person classes for high school students and so forth. Schools, she's basically said we're not having it, and that's as a state. So she's not even leaving it up to districts. There are some decisions that districts can make, but she's making very sweeping restrictions. Um, in states like Rhode Island and Illinois, many of those counties within the and districts within the states of Rhode Island and Illinois, they are having closures across those states. And that and those 2 states I mentioned because that theirs is coming because there's such pushback from educators within those states about the infections and the numbers that are going up, and so a lot of the unions and education circles within those states have tried to their state boards of education, and they have started to make closures. um Fairfax, Virginia, announced that they would be delaying plans for their school systems, youngest learners, and those students with disabilities, which they had planned to have return. They had planned for them to return to in-person instruction, but they said, "Yeah, we're going to not go ahead with that. That we're going to delay those." And New York is teetering. They're still teetering. They have the number for the New York City is 3% positivity rate. That once they cross that threshold, it would trigger a citywide closure of schools. Um, and it's really teetering on that. And so they have individual areas within the New York's school system that have done it, but I'm as of right now, they haven't done a everybody in New York City school system, which is the largest school district in the country. Let me see if that is all of my updates. I believe that's all of the updates that I have. Um, it sucks for in those that and I can tell you what states. If you live in these 4 states, you probably definitely need to look at your school district website, contact your child's school, and be very vigilant with regard to being updated. And that's Arkansas, Florida, Iowa, and Texas, where the state has mandated some form of in-person instruction. So you need to be vigilant in those states. That's all.
Um, for the people who came in late, what I want to say is, El Teddy is reading the updates from the website we've been using all along as of November the 15th. Was it 15th? You said
18th.
18th. I'm sorry, 18th. So that is as of November the 18th. We know that this is moving fast. Um, school systems and states are making announcements really on an hourly basis as the numbers continue to soar. So thank you for those of you that are dropping information in the chat as far as what's going on in your area, because again, we know that things, have been changing rapidly because of the rise in numbers being so crazy and going so quickly. So thank you guys so much for sharing and updating us on what's going on around you guys. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting ready to head back into a virtual environment, whether we like it or not. For those of you who had a little bit of a reprieve, some places never had a reprieve. Like I said, my county never went back. But some places did have a little bit of a reprieve, whether it was a hybrid situation, whether it was a high school went, but the elementary schools didn't, or vice versa. I know some daycares opened back up. And so with all of that being said, I guess what I want to say to you guys is let's not get caught flat-footed like we did the first time around. You kind of see it coming. You kind of see what's going on. And some places, I see that some states have already started, or counties and cities have already started issuing stay homes again. It looks like the stay homes aren't, and you could correct me, El Teddy, if you're saying something different. It looks like the stay home orders, at least right now, aren't being as drastic, like meaning they're not shutting everything down. It's like they're still letting businesses stay open, but they're putting curfews in place, or they're making them close at a certain time. Are you seeing that in what you're looking
There
at?
are a lot of places, and like I said, it's a state by state, and
Right.
sometimes county or municipality by municipality and county by county situation where you really have to be vigilant and do that. Let me give some advice and recommendations to parents out there who have students, because we said this on our last Teacher Project 2.0 show. You need to be prepared for the reality that your child will probably not be in school in the normal school setting for the entirety of this school year. You
Facts.
need to brace yourself. What that means is this: you are going to have to start to be creative, innovative, and I'll use that word again, vigilant with when it comes to your child's education. I'll give you an example. I have a couple parents who have reached out to me because they know that their child has always, even when they were in school, had weakness with regard to in reading and English and so forth. And because they know and they care enough about their child to know that their child cannot afford to have a whole year off from education. Am I? Am I
No,
frozen?
I'm here. I'm listening. I'm with you.
Oh, okay. It look I thought I was frozen because you weren't moving, and then I saw that your fan wasn't on. And so because you weren't moving and the fan wasn't moving, I was like, "Oh, dear God, am I frozen? Dear God." No. But let me say this. But what they've done is those parents reached out to me and say, "Listen, here's what I need you to do. I need you to do just like you would do if it were a normal school year. My child meets with their English teacher 2 or 3 times a week. I need you to do 2 or 3 times a week, hour and a half, 2 hour sessions with Lil Johnny, Lil Janet, because Lil Johnny and Lil Janet cannot afford to have a whole year where they're not getting sound instruction in this area because they were already at a, they were already, that was their weakness already. And I cannot afford to let the learning curve pass them that far because it really we've talked about this. Once this is all over, nobody's going to care that your child had a year off from real sound instructions. Nobody's going to care about all of these disadvantages that you have. All they're going to care is, where is your child at this point? So
Right.
you need to do everything you can to do that. I know a lot of teachers that have volunteered their services, some for free, some for a small nominal fee, to provide those tutorings, which a lot of times does have to happen virtually. But trust me, we have platforms and systems in place where we can still do it. Listen, I know teachers in the classroom before this all went down that was doing all of their instruction either on a computer, on a smart board, Promethean board, PowerPoint, this, that, and the third. So the instruction can still be taking place. It just may not be where I can touch little Johnny or little Janet.
Right.
Um, and so forth. So I want to say that parents, you are going to have to take control on your child of your child's education, which should have been happening even before COVID, but now there's much more of a need for that. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, like for example, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but and I told El Teddy this when it went down, we had literally 24 hours. And Des, shout out to Discovering Des, who's one of our educators and contributor. I'm gonna start giving him a title like they do on like CNN and MSNBC. One of the contributors to the show. We bring him in to speak on education sometime with us. He said, look, I took all my stuff home just in case, you know, they call it while we out on Thanksgiving break. Like that makes a lot of sense. And when the county that I work in made the announcement, literally, I remember I was in my car. I was on my way to hang out with some friends, go to dinner with some friends. I pulled into the parking lot. The announcement came across my phone that my county announced that they were going. And remember, for a lot of places, it started off as 2 weeks. Okay, now we're going to add another 2 weeks. Okay, we're going to add another 2 weeks. Okay, fine. We're just going to close for the year. And so the announcement was made, hey, we got 2 weeks that we're going to go home and see how this thing shakes out. And so that was at like 5 o'clock on a Thursday. When we went back to school that Monday, my principal met with us and he was like, listen, I need y'all to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to have to adjust the schedule so that, because we have an A-Day, B-Day schedule. All of the kids are going to come. So I saw all of my kids for like 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And then the rest of the day, teachers were expected to put together these lesson plans, right? We had to send the kids home with a certain, I forgot what it was, like I think 3 lessons or something like that. Well, because my textbooks are online and my kids I'd already been using my textbooks online throughout the school year. They knew how to access their textbooks. They knew how to do assignments in their textbook. We have been using our online textbooks. Because I used Google Classroom, I would put information in there. I would grade it. Like I was already sort of virtual. So for me, I didn't have to spend a lot of time. Like it was the line for the copy machine. Ridiculous. You know the struggle. Any educator knows the struggle about the copy machine.
Mm-hmm.
Every copy machine in the building had a line.
Or having copy paper because your school only gives you a small amount of copy paper and you grabbing here.
They basically opened up the doors to the castle and was like, whatever paper, like they was finding paper now. Before the week before, we ain't had no paper. Now all of a sudden we have plenty of paper, right? But for me, I just didn't have to do all of that running around because I was like, okay, I'm just going to upload all this stuff in Google Classroom. And I did print out a hard copy of the assignments, but I didn't have to put together packets and stuff like that. I was like, this is what we're doing right here. And so, I mean, I say all that to say, going back to what El Teddy said, that's what we're going to just have to be ready for from the teacher side, as well as the parent, as well as the student. Like, that's just kind of where you know it, you see it with the numbers going up and no end in sight. I just see us all being closed before the end of the year. I see us being back at all, probably 98% of the schools in the country are going to be closed again before Christmas break. So we just have to be ready for that, you guys. I'm going to go back through our archives. I told El Teddy I'm going to set up some playlists. So I'm going to go back and set up the playlist for all of the virtual videos we've done because we have given you guys a lot of resources in the last 8 or 9 months. So I'm going to go back to that. Also, I told you guys before, I found this wonderful place called Teachers of TikTok. There are so many resources. Just put in, if you go, you don't even have to just download the app TikTok. Put in the hashtag Teachers of TikTok, or if you have Instagram, Teachers of Instagram, you will find a lot of resources there as well to just kind of help us. So, Diamond Onyx says, my question is, did it make sense to remove the children early on? November 2nd, only allow their return. The USA has been misinformed on how contagious it is. Hold on, wait a minute. Let me make sure I understand your question. Did it make sense to remove the children early on? Only allow their return. I'm not sure I understand the question. Elsa, do you understand the question? Because I don't understand. I don't.
I think what saying is, I think what she's saying is that why did they take them out only to send them back when you mishandled the whole situation with how contagious this was. If you were going to take them out, then you needed to keep them out until this thing was all fully dealt with, or just leave them in school, one or the other. But this back and forth may have done more harm than help.
But I think that goes back to our leadership. Remember all the pressure that the president was putting on the governors to send these kids back to school. Remember the pressure that parents were putting on school districts for the kids to go back to school. And once businesses started opening back up and parents were going back to work, there was a lot of pressure for us to quote unquote get back to normal. We know that was ill-informed, but like you said, this whole situation has been mishandled from the beginning. But it's been the power structure, the people in charge, and not everywhere. Because like I said, like the governor of my county, he's a Republican and he bucked them. He bucked the rest of the Republicans and was like, I'm not sending my kids back to school until it's safe. I feel reasonably comfortable that it's safe to send them. But a lot of governors did not do the same thing. And remember, school districts, we've said this before, it's not a universal system and it's not a state by state system. It's county by county. And like El Teddy was saying, in Texas, it's city by city, right?
Yes, Texas have individual school districts, so you could have one county and have 5 or 6 school districts within that one county, because
Right.
that municipality might say, no, we have our own school district for our own municipality. So
Right.
it
And right. And then remember, private schools do their own thing. Charter schools can do their own thing. So there is no universal, this is what everybody needs to be doing, and that has a lot to do with it as well. That's one of the things that Joe Biden has been speaking of when he takes over, is there becoming some universal policies put in place as it relates to the handling of the virus. And I'm sure that's going to trickle down to schools to a certain extent. He can't, well, I'm not going to say what he can't do. I guess he can put an executive order in, but even going down to like mask mandates and things of that nature, like his team is speaking on putting universal precautions in place to try to protect everybody. But that's a good question, Diamond Onyx. But again, you have to look at how this whole thing has been handled. It's really the power structure. Yeah. So with that being said, if you have any more questions, y'all know, always drop them in the chat. We'll address them as we see them. But let's talk about No Child Left Behind, right? So I'm going to read an actual definition of what No Child Left Behind was, and then we could just speak on, again, we started talking about this last week with what I saw, what El Teddy saw from our vantage point. We have educators in the room. They could talk about what they saw. But let's just talk a little bit about what exactly was No Child Left Behind. Okay, so No Child Left Behind, the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 was in effect from 2002 to 2015. It was a version of the Elementary and Secondary Act, ESEA. It was replaced by Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015. And there were some differences, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about what the original intent was. The original intent, it affected every public school. And it's important to know public, because it didn't have the same effect in private schools and charter schools, but every public school. And the intention was to level the playing field for students who were disadvantaged, including minorities, students in poverty, students receiving special education services, and students who English was not their first language. It included such things as annual testing. Schools had to give students statewide math and reading tests every year for grades 3 through 8, and once in grades 8 through 12. Parents had the right to get the individual test results for their schools, and it had to be publicly reported. For example, schools had to report how students in special education were performing on reading and math. So they didn't publish, obviously, students' names, but they would publish the subgroups. So under No Child Left Behind, You could look up any school in the public school in the United States and see how they did on their last set of testing for children of color, children with English as a first language, special education students, all of that. Academic progress. States had to bring all students, including those in special education, up to the proficient level on the test. Penalties. Schools with, they called it adequate yearly progress. Again, in teaching circles, you knew AYP. You would hear AYP in your dreams, okay? You heard AYP ad nauseum, but that's what it was. When they say bring it to proficient level, they meant that schools had to set targets for improvement, which was called adequate yearly progress. And the school's report card was based on whether the school met that progress or not. Penalties. Schools with many low-income students were called Title I. If a Title I school did not meet the annual yearly progress, it allowed the state to change the school's leadership team or even close the school. If a school repeatedly failed to meet AYP, parents had the option to move their children to another school. Also, the state had the option to take over that school. AYP goals and sanctions were supposed to push schools to improve services and instruction for struggling students, including students in special education. These penalties did not apply to non-Title I schools. So the penalties only went in place to schools who already were identified as having low income, that kind of thing, okay? Mm-hmm. Accommodations on statewide tests. Children with special needs, with IEP plans, and 504s had accommodations. No Child Left Behind said that reasonable accommodations also had to be provided to them for statewide tests. And we saw that. Anyway, we'll get back to that. No Child Left Behind said that all students must take. Oh, thank you. Somebody just posted this on Twitter. Thank you so much. No Child Left Behind said that all students must take state tests to have AYP. Schools had to test at least 95% of children. And El Teddy knows they were bribing kids with all kinds of stuff to make sure they showed up for school. Your child could have been out on suspension for trying to burn the school down, but they was allowed to come to school and take that daggone test, honey. 95% of students in each subgroup. This included students in poverty, minorities, and those receiving special education services. So that is an overview of what No Child Left Behind. Oh, thank you, Quintessential. Mwah. That was an overview of what No Child Left Behind put in place. A couple of more things, and then I'll pause so El Teddy can jump in. No Child Left Behind gave more flexibility to states on how they spent federal funding as long as schools were improving. That's the caveat, as long as they were improving. No Child Left Behind said all teachers must be, quote unquote, highly qualified in the subject they teach. Special education teachers had to be certified and demonstrate knowledge in every subject they teach. And No Child Left Behind said that schools must use science and research-based instruction in teaching methods. El Teddy, go ahead, jump in.
Now, in education circles, Nickelby is a curse word for a lot of people. They deem it a curse word. In the thought and inception of Nickelby, there were a lot of good things there.
I agree.
Now, I think where people a lot of time take issue is the whole Title I, and that being the people who got a lot of the teeth. The thing about it is this: Title I was the only way that the federal government in a lot of areas could really affect a school, because school funds by its inception come on the municipality level, county level, and or state level. That's who pays for education. Now, the federal government has different programs that they will give a district, for the district to allocate to certain schools for certain things, and that's where Title I came in. So if the federal government was going to come in making all of these sweeping changes, they could only affect schools that were receiving the federal dollars. Now, let me say this. It can, and trust me, I'm not a fan of Nickelby either, but I just want to at least present the other side. It stands to reason that the federal government said, just like at the beginning of the school year, when you students to lie on their lunch forms to prove that they qualified for free or reduced lunch so that you could get more students under free or reduced lunch, which then will qualify your school to be considered Title One. And now your school has all of this extra money that they can get because they are considered now Title One. You can also expect, okay, we gave y'all all this money, but that comes at a price. Yeah, we gave you all of this money, and now you can get these Title One funds, but you got to give some accountability to that. You have to prove that you're doing right by all of this extra money that you're getting. And that's where all of these sweeping policies came. A lot of people saw it as being racially insensitive and racially biased, but a lot of people negated the fact that this came because there were extra funds being given by the federal government to these Title One schools. So I don't want people to leave that part out. Now, what ended up coming was school districts then started to say, I don't want to have a differentiation between the Title One and the non-Title One. They started saying what's good for the Title One schools was good for everybody. And so that's why whole states started saying every school is going to get report cards. Every school will have to meet AYP. And so that way there was a way to it just kept a level field playing. Now, where it started to really get where people started to take offense was into this whole we're gonna shut your school down. We're going to you know we're going to take the school away from you and make it state funded because the mechanism by which you were determining AYP and the mechanism by which schools were being graded wasn't equitable. The tests that they were using to make these sweeping decisions was not equitable. I'll give you a perfect example. We had this I'll give you an example from my state of Florida. We got students living in Miami. We had a writing test where one of the writing tests was talking about students dealing with camels and deserts for kids in Miami. Or when they talked about describe what it's like to, have a day in the snow for kids in Miami who had never seen snow. But and you want them to give these elaborate stories, and they're like, "What are you talking about? I've never even seen snow." And so and there were questions that were on assessments that were biased toward people with a certain socioeconomic status because they might have been used to dealing with certain things that people of a certain socioeconomic status were not used to or had not been exposed to. And so there also, are studies about the fact that some of these same assessments by which all of these sweeping legislations was going to be enacted, the legislators were in bed with the CEOs of these companies that were making these assessments. And so now, for example, in the state of Florida, the same company, Pearson, that were making these tests, the Bush family, where Jeb Bush was governor, was one of the biggest backers and one of the biggest benefactors of a company like a Pearson. So you can't have it both ways. And mind you, Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida, and his brother was the president of the United States, who signed all of this into and the Bush family was very much involved with Pearson and all of those things. So these are I just wanted to present both sides where yes, in its inception and some of the things that it was intended to do was good when put in the hands of people who have nefarious, things going on of their own and have their own mind, it can be poisoned. I know I went the long way around that, but yeah, sorry.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think the intention. I never had an issue with the intention of No Child Left Behind. I do think there should be accountability on both ends. As a parent, you should know whether your children are succeeding, and there should be a data based evaluation to show you that. So for 100%, so I 100% agree with that. I also don't have an issue with um I don't have an issue with some, like I said, I don't have an issue with the intention. Let me just do that. But as someone who lived through it, um I know how it was used, and it was used as a weapon against teachers. In my experience, it was used as a weapon against public schools. At that time, there was a total attack on public schools in the District of Columbia. They were closed. They were using this as a way to close schools and open up more charter schools. Um,
Which was money in the hands of these same people we
Oh
talked
yeah,
about.
absolutely. When you talk about quote unquote the highly qualified teacher, do I think there should be a policy to say whether someone is qualified or I get all of that, but like you said, that test, that praxis, I know that praxis is just a money machine. I have friends who have taken that praxis so many times. Um, so for me, again, it was never what the intent was. It was the application of it, and that's why it became such a bad word for people who lived through it. You know what I'm saying?
And even before we get to because I know when you talk about Nickelby, you got to talk to the whole stigma of the teach to the test, and we'll get there because
Right.
that was a whole thing as well. But in terms of how it affected some communities, is when you talk about schools where, yeah, you giving us this chunk change with Title I, but there are still other resources that we're not privy to, that we don't have access to in some of these areas. Yeah, you can come to school and get certain things, but little Johnny and little Janet still got to go home. They don't even have internet, much less talk about having a computer. Going home and not having a parent that has to have two and three jobs and that can be at home to come and sit down with you and say, little Johnny, little Janet, did you do your homework today? Did you have homework today? Well, let me sit down and help you with that homework. Because mom and dad got to go work three jobs because you have already placed this entire group of people at a disadvantage economically, educationally, financially, and so forth. But when we start to talk about the shutting down of schools, you're talking about in a lot of black neighborhoods where that respective high school was like the black church, the beacon of light within that community. In a lot of segregated black America, it was churches and some high schools or elementary schools that were the beacon of black. The schools were educating our children. The churches was edifying the souls, and those two institutions were institutions in the black area. And so when they came through with Nickelby and started saying, "Oh, we're going to shut down this black school that has educated thousands upon thousands of black people and has an alumni that is, a sounding board for excellence in the black community, and now you're going to shut down this black school? No, we're not having that." And it then began, according to a lot of the communities of color, looking like an attack on education. Mind you, and I'll introduce this really be, and I'll let you go. We're not going to even introduce the whole thing about the fact that when integration came, you watered down the education systems in a lot of these black schools. You introduced a lot of dumbed down education to black students who did not have any dumbed down education at their black schools when it was all black and before integration came to be. Not that integration is a bad thing, but there's that whole angle that we could introduce into the whole um dialogue. I'm sorry, I had a whole moment.
No, you're fine. I mean, because the reality is, I mean, that's what this is all about. That's what this channel is about, or whatever. Because everybody has a different experience, and you are absolutely correct. I know. Again, here in DC, let me tell you something. Those parents and those communities fought their asses off, and a lot of schools were able to avoid being closed, but more schools did close. Some were closed based on false promises and what was going to happen and what it was going to look like. And if y'all just stick with us, we're going to do da 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 da. If y'all just stick with us, it's going to look like this. Like, it was a lot of that was going on. And I was here for it. You know, I was here when I was working in DC public schools when it was happening. Now, what I did not see it happening in the county schools in Maryland, in the suburbs, as much. We also had, you know, the threat of the school being taken over by, even though DC is not a state, we do have the State Board of Education here in DC. It was called the State Board of Education, even though DC is not a state. But the same mindset of, oh, they're going to take over the school. The other thing that was a really big sidebar of Nickleby, which was used as a weapon, was that part I read about if the schools aren't meeting AYP, then that turnover rate. Principals, it got to the point, and I'm not an exaggeration, and I'm going to invite my really good friend, Candy Peterson. She's an educational advocate, very well known here in DC. She had a blog at the time, and basically her blog was all about exposing corruption and things like that was going on in the schools. But every fall, the way the contracts were written, they changed the principal contracts, and the way that the principal contracts were written, they had 30 days to let them know whether they still had a job or not. And so renewal contracts went out around spring break, and every year at spring break she would post I forgot what she would word it, but basically, you know, which principals are getting fired this year. And I promise you, every year there was a list of 30 to 40 principals that were getting fired every spring that weren't coming back the next year. And it got to the point here in DC where there were some schools who in a 7-year period went through 5 principals. You're never going to get anything if there's no stability. And I get it. There are some situations because principals went from having 3-year contracts to 1-year contracts. And research will tell you that it takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years to turn a school around. So you're expecting people to do in 1 year what research tells you takes anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And so once again, because if the test scores don't come back the way they should come back, now you can fire everybody. And so, and you know, El Teddy, what happens when a principal gets fired, their whole team is gone. So we had literally every year, we had schools where parents didn't know from year to year who the principal was at their child's school. And the same thing with teachers. You know, we didn't know from year to year who our boss was going to be. You built no relationships with the kids. You built no family, no camaraderie among the staff. And there was a big distrust, a very big distrust, because now principals came in knowing I only have about in a 9-month school year, I only have about 7 months to really make my mark. And I got to come in here like a bulldozer, or word is going to get back to the powers that be, and I'm going to lose my job.
To answer your question, Des, I am familiar with that program. That will probably be for another live. For those people wondering, Call Me Mr. program is a program, I believe it started at Clemson, but it was designed to get more Black teachers in education. And I think their program specifically was for elementary schools, get more Black male teachers in like elementary schools. And I know a lot of other universities and other programs have began to adopt similar programs, but I am familiar with that program. There's also a consortium of Black male educators that have conferences every year, and I'll bring if and when we do that topic.
I'm putting it on the list.
I'll bring them on to talk about the absence of black male teachers within education sectors, and I'll bring some people on, and we can talk about
You
that.
know, maybe we can do a show on. We can do Call Me Mister, but we can also speak on those programs as a whole. Because again, under No Child Left Behind, you had the rise of the teach you know that program. I can't get it out of my.
But no, I don't know that we want to do that in the same program because those are totally different programs.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, tell me the name, and then I'll tell you what my brain is.
For America.
Thank you. I couldn't get it out of my head. I know it's not the same thing, and I wasn't saying put it under the same umbrella like it was the same thing, but as almost like a compare and contrast. These are both programs to recruit educators, but in the way in which it is being done in one area versus another. But we don't have to put it on. That's fine. We don't have to put it together. We don't want to dilute that. That's fine. I don't
Yeah,
have a problem.
and the only reason I say that is because Teach for America is primarily for people who already have degrees. The Call Me Mister is in their school of education
No, that's not
within.
true. No, that's not true. Teach for America recruited in colleges. They
Well,
recruited
no,
teachers
I'm saying in
in college.
recruiting in colleges, but a large portion of their people did not major in education. That's what I'm saying. They
No,
recruited a
Teach
lot
for
of
America.
college
Was
students.
this, no Teach for America was the same thing. Teach for America. These were people who majored in pre med and all other stuff.
That's what I'm
The
saying. But what I'm saying is, Call Me Mister is not that. Call Me Mister is for people majoring, to get more education majors
Oh, I
that
see
are
what you're
black
saying. I see what
males.
you're saying. Oh, we had to get Dez on here. He said he was in the first cohort at his school, at his
Okay.
college, in Clemson. Okay, all right. So we had to get
Right.
so
So
Dez,
like
when
I
we
said,
did the show.
I know where it is in
Yeah,
Central
so Des,
Jackson and Clemson.
we'll have to get you on
Mhm.
there when we do that show. We'll have to definitely get you on here to speak from your experience, especially since you're a contributor to the program.
But back to No Child Left Behind. What ended up happening is what really be is talking about with regard to principals knowing if I don't get these numbers to look right, I'm going to end up getting fired. That trickles down. And so that principal ended up coming into their institution saying, you don't worry about nothing else. You need to worry about this test. Because if we don't get certain numbers on this test, then what's going to end up happening is I'm going to get fired. Y'all going to get moved, displaced, this, that, and the third. Because in a lot of districts, it wasn't just the principal, it was even on the instructional level where teachers, if teachers did not meet their numbers that they were supposed to meet, because I lived through it where they were moving teachers and saying, now mind you, it's not even equitable because if you went to a school and that person had to ask the ground with you and didn't like you, they could say, I'm giving you all these low level kids. Now I also would love to bring on a friend of mine who worked he started off as a teacher, but he worked with our state board of education, and he was a part of the people who crunched the numbers, who came up with the formula that determined AYP. And I know that was a big discussion here in our state. What is the actual formula? How do you determine what an individual student's annual yearly progress is? And they had this, formula where you look like Rain Man putting all of these integrals and derivatives up and stuff like that, where it's based on the kids' progress over the past 5 years versus what school, who's been their teacher and where they live, and it was like 1,000 different uh variables in this particular formula. But my point is that it's still at the end of the day, there's so many factors that you just can't put a finger on. Because I could have taught little Johnny as much as I wanted all school year and had him prepared, and he could have woke up having a bad day. He could have woke up where he just had a situation happen at home. He could have woke up and not have eaten the night before and something like that. And now that done screwed him up on this test the next day. And now that's all thrown out the window because everything was based on that one thing. And so you
Mhm.
had this notion of teacher to the test, and a lot of the arts started to get less funded or taken out of schools, and vocational classes started to get taken out of schools because they were making students not only take this English class, now you got to take this extra reading class on top of the English class to supplement the fact that you didn't meet the numbers in this English class. So I'm gonna give you this extra reading class in order to supplement the fact that Johnny can't read, and I'm gonna give him this extra reading class, and that's gonna take away from him being able to take up painting or band or voice or wood shop or auto mechanics and stuff like that. So all of these things ended up, one thing led to another that led to another, and there was this snowball effect. And so what began as something that was great in its inception snowballed into this thing that it was like, we don't want any parts of it.
Right. No, that's fine, Miss Witt. We'll get there before we because we're almost at an hour, so we'll get there. Miss Witt's question, and we can always do a part two. We can, because we didn't even really get into what No Child Left Behind was replaced with. So we can do a whole nother show on that and talk about the differences, the pros, the cons, what it looks like now, and all that good stuff. Yeah, a lot of the electives. Yeah. So her question is, do you think that superintendents should be elected? And not just the school board?
Some places it is. Some places, there are some areas where the superintendent absolutely is elected. I have seen that, but like you said, most places the school board members are elected, and then the superintendent is selected by the members of the school board, and the school board will vote on that person and so forth. They have a whole process of vetting and finding a person that they would like to have, and then at that point there would be a whole nomination process, and the school board would vote on it. I did want to talk about the good parts that came out of Nickelby. The one good part is what it did for students with disabilities, SWD, students with disabilities, and ELL, English language learners, because that was they were going neglected in terms of the resources, the and the accommodations that were being made to those individuals. I know Really B has been an advocate for students with disabilities as well as taught them. I've taught students with disabilities, but I have much more um, uh, uh, history with ELL, English language learners, because at being a department chair for both ELL and English department, that's a huge segment, and I know what those students come over here and the accommodations that must be made for them, as well as the students with disabilities. So for the bad parts of No Child Left Behind, it was it was good in what it did for students with disabilities as well as English language learners, and forcing the education system to not, just push them in the background and in a little closet and in a little room, but force them to deal with those children.
Yeah. I even mm, again, it's not the intent, it's the implementation.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Um,
mean, Rochelle, Miss Witt, that's a whole discussion. School boards, people on school boards that have never been
let's.
in the
I'm
school
adding
and
it to the
never
list, y'all. I'm
and
adding
never
it to the list.
never they came from being a Burger King franchise owner, and now you want to go over here and make sweeping changes to what the school system has going on in place.
I'm adding it to the list. Like again, here in DC, we they voted for mayor control. So the mayor controls the schools here in DC. So the school board is more of a figurehead. They no longer have the teeth that they once had. So, you might as well you might as well elect the Burger King worker, because what they say don't really matter that much anymore. Um, so you guys, thank you so much again. If you have any questions, the email is trickling down at the bottom of the screen. You can always
For those people listening on the podcast, it is the Teacher Project 2.0 at
Thank you.
gmail.com.
Thank you. I have to get used to addressing both. Yes, and it'll be in the description box. So that you can always email us if you have any questions, concerns. If you have any, we always taking topic suggestions, especially now that we're committed to being more consistent. We're always taking requests. As we come up with these conversations, I'm adding them to my list so that we can be prepared to come to you guys and speak on them. Right, quintessential. That's it happened in Chicago first, and then DC followed suit with the mayor having control of the school. That's a whole nother. That could be a whole conversation as well. And so thank you guys for being here once again. And I appreciate it. El Teddy, final word.
Um, Definitely, like we said at the beginning of this, you need to be vigilant on two fronts. One, figuring out openings, closings of schools in your respective areas with regard to your children, your student, your whomever, or even if you work for the school system, you need to know that. The second front that you need to be vigilant on, if you're a parent, a guardian, or somebody in charge with the seeing the education through for a child, you need to understand that you cannot let this entire school year pass by and have the learning curve pass that child by. So you're going to have to put a lot more energy and effort into what is the education of that child, soliciting tutoring or being more vocal present and active with regard to where they're going to get this education, what programs they're using, making sure that they get it done and they're actually completing the work and are making progress and are actually learning. So that's another front that that parents need to, because I think so many times parents just got lazy, especially with public schools. I'm gonna just send my child to school. It's their responsibility to teach them and do everything in terms of making sure they learn. I ain't gotta do nothing, but make sure they have on clean clothes and drop them off. And that's just not how education was designed. Even though public schools is something funded by your respective state and local governments, it was never designed for them to be an end all be all in with regard to your child's education. That's all I have.
And we're out.